The wind had a voice that night. It crept through the cracked window, through the rusted metal blinds, carrying a whisper that was almost, just almost human. Mara froze mid-step, the cold pressing against her skin like invisible fingers. Outside, the street was empty, lit by the flickering orange of a single broken street lamp. Yet she could feel it watching, some presence lingering in the shadows, waiting. A faint sound, a scrape against the asphalt, made her heart stutter. She spun toward the window, squinting into the darkness. Nothing moved. Just the ordinary shapes of parked cars, the skeletal branches of leafless trees, and the occasional blink of a distant porch light. Then it came, a voice. Low, dry, and deliberate. Mara. She swallowed hard, certain she had imagined it. But the whisper returned, closer this time, more confident. Mara. Why are you here? Her breath hitched. The door behind her rattled softly, as if someone, or something, had leaned against it, testing its lock. She hadn't heard a knock. She hadn't seen a shadow pass. Yet every instinct screamed that she was no longer alone. The silence pressed in immediately after, thicker than the night itself. Her phone lay on the counter, its screen dark, no signal, no connection to the outside world. And then the whisper came again, almost tender, almost familiar. Don't turn around. Mara froze, frozen in place between curiosity and fear, as the air around her thickened. She felt the room shift ever so slightly, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. Mara's hands trembled as she gripped the doorknob, the metal cold and slick under her fingers. She told herself it was just the wind, just her imagination, but the weight of the whisper, low, deliberate, insistent, pressed against her chest, making each heartbeat a thunderclap. She forced herself to step forward, footfalls muted against the threadbare carpet. The apartment felt smaller somehow, tighter, like the shadows had grown overnight and were pooling in the corners, waiting. She flicked the light switch, half expecting the bulbs to sputter, but the weak yellow glow held. Dust motes drifted lazily in the beams, glinting like tiny, indifferent stars. And yet, despite the light, she could feel the darkness leaning closer, watching. A shiver ran down her spine, and for a fleeting moment she remembered the old caretaker at her previous apartment, an emaciated man with trembling hands and eyes like storm clouds, who had whispered once, "You think you're alone, but they are always here." Mara had laughed at the time. Now the memory clawed at her. She swallowed hard, the sound too loud in the oppressive quiet. The city outside continued its low hum, indifferent. Yet in her apartment, every creak of the radiator, every faint groan of the building settling, sounded amplified, deliberate. She set her bag down on the counter and reached for her phone, hoping for a signal, a lifeline. The screen remained black. She tried again. Nothing. A low buzzing filled her ears, like a distant conversation just out of reach. Her stomach tightened. The rational part of her mind searched for explanations. A neighbor moving furniture, pipes settling, the wind. But none satisfied the gnawing dread that had settled over her. Her eyes drifted toward the kitchen doorway. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw a shadow detach from the corner, long and fluid, moving just outside the edge of her vision. She blinked, and it was gone. She could tell herself it was a trick of the light, fatigue, her own imagination, but deep down she knew the fear had substance. A soft tap echoed from the window pane behind her. She spun, heart hammering, and saw nothing. The street remained empty, the tree still, the single flickering lamp still humming orange light over cracked asphalt. Yet the feeling persisted, curling around her spine, curling around her thoughts, whispering insistently that something was wrong. That something was here. She sank onto the couch, hugging her knees, staring at the corner of the room where shadows pooled. The clock on the wall ticked with exaggerated precision, each second a drumbeat in her chest. Mara's thoughts raced. She had moved to this apartment to escape noise, escape loneliness, but now the silence was suffocating. It wasn't peaceful. It was waiting, patient, watching. The whisper came again, impossibly close, as if it had materialized from the air beside her. You shouldn't be here. Her skin prickled, hairs standing on end. She froze, unsure if she had imagined it, or if it had come from somewhere outside the bounds of reality. The words carried no malice, not exactly, but a weight that made her bones ache. The kind of warning that was less a threat and more inevitability. Mara forced herself to speak, her voice trembling. "Who's there?" Silence answered. Then came a soft scraping sound, metallic, deliberate, somewhere between her kitchen and the hallway. She could not pinpoint it, and the ambiguity gnawed at her. She imagined doors breathing, walls sighing, the apartment itself stretching and contracting in ways that defied reason. Rational thought faltered. Logic splintered. Her mind wandered back to the boxes she had left unpacked. Photographs, letters, small trinkets from the past. Normally these would have brought comfort. Now they seemed to carry weight, shadows hanging heavier over them than over anything else in the room. She could almost see the edges of reality fraying around them, the familiar transforming into the subtly, unbearably strange. A sudden knock rattled the front door. Quick, sharp, impossible to ignore. Mara's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea who could be there. Friends weren't visiting, neighbors never knocked. And yet the sound was certain real. She inched toward the door, each step a war between curiosity and terror. The whisper returned, almost gentle this time. "Don't open it." Her fingers hovered over the handle, cold sweat slicking her palms. She wanted to retreat, to hide beneath blankets, to convince herself that the apartment had become a stage for her fears. And yet, against every instinct, she felt drawn forward, as if invisible strings tugged at her very being. Slowly, trembling, she turned the knob. The door creaked, inching open. And there, just beyond the threshold, a figure stood. Motionless, unidentifiable in the dim light of the hallway. Its presence was simple, silent, yet suffocatingly real. Mara's mind screamed, urging her to shut the door, to flee, to scream. But her body refused to obey. She could only stare, frozen, as the figure seemed to exhale, the faintest sound of a breath brushing past her senses, carrying the chilling certainty of something ancient and patient. And then it moved. The figure in the doorway didn't speak, didn't move. It simply existed, a shape that seemed to soak the light from the hallway. Mara's breath came shallow, uneven, a fragile sound in the stillness of the apartment. When she blinked, it was gone, as if the moment had been nothing but a trick of her imagination. Yet the dread didn't dissipate. It lingered, curling around her chest, pressing her toward the edge of reason. She retreated to the couch, clutching a pillow like a shield. Her mind raced back through everything she had known about this building. Old tenants had whispered about strange sounds, shadows moving against the grain of logic, sudden cold patches that no heat could warm. She remembered her own friend's words when she first moved in. "That place. It's full of eyes you don't see. Just keep the doors closed at night." She had laughed then, dismissing superstition. Tonight, that laughter felt foolish, hollow, a sound from someone she no longer recognized. The first nights were subtle. A creak in the hallway that sounded like footsteps. Just one, slow, deliberate, though she lived alone. A window rattling without wind. Her phone would light up with a message. Nothing there when she unlocked it. She began recording, convinced she would catch a rational explanation. The recordings captured only silence, though the air felt dense, almost tangible, as if someone or something had passed just out of frame. Then came the whispers. Low, sibilant, sometimes calling her name, sometimes muttering words she could not fully understand. At first, she thought exhaustion had fractured her mind. At work, she could barely concentrate, replaying the sounds, hearing them in the hum of fluorescent lights. But the moments grew harder to dismiss. They weren't bound by location. They followed her, insistent, patient. She sought help quietly. A neighbor, older, grizzled, spoke with hesitation. "You're not the first," he said, voice low, eyes darting as if the walls themselves might hear him. "This place, it holds things. Things that look and listen. Most people leave before they see too much." Mara tried to nod, smiled nervously. "Things? What kind of things?" He shook his head. "Better you don't know. Just keep your lights on. Don't answer if it calls." Back in her apartment, she could feel the air shift, subtle at first. A draft that had no source. Books on shelves tilted as if exhaling. Shadows stretched unnaturally across walls. lengthening toward her even when the light remained constant. She slept little, afraid to close her eyes. When she did, the figure appeared, sometimes just a shadow at the edge of her vision, sometimes clearer, always silent, always patient. Her curiosity became a trap. She began to research, scouring forums and old news reports for any reference to the building's history. She found hints, stories of missing tenants, sudden disappearances, strange claims from caretakers long gone. One record noted that in 1983, a family had vanished overnight. The police found only personal belongings, no trace of struggle, no footprints leading out. An elderly man recalled hearing laughter, then screaming, then nothing. Every account ended the same way. Inexplicable, final, leaving the living behind to wonder. The micro-events escalated. One evening, she placed a glass of water on the counter. Hours later, it was shattered. Fragments spread in a perfect circle on the floor. No one had entered. The air smelled faintly of iron, cold and coppery. On another night, she found the furniture subtly rearranged. Chairs angled slightly toward the corners, drawers ajar, pictures on walls tilted just enough to suggest observation. Each time she tried to photograph or record the disturbances, her devices glitched. Photos came out blank, videos corrupted. It was as if the apartment itself refused evidence. Dialogue came in fragments. A phone call, static heavy, whispered, "Don't stay longer." She replayed it endlessly, voice growing clearer yet more chilling each time, like an echo from somewhere beneath the floorboards. She asked the building manager, a man in his 60s with shaking hands, but he merely grunted and shook his head. "You can't fight it. You can only wait." Even outside, the effect followed. She walked the street at night, seeing shadows where none should exist, feeling eyes on her back, hearing faint laughter from empty doorways. The paranoia bled into daily life. Coffee spilled, keys lost, words misremembered. Her friends noticed her change. Her gaze darting, fingers trembling, her sentences breaking into whispers mid-thought. Yet when she tried to explain, her voice sounded absurd, childlike. How could she describe the watching, the patience, the impossibility of it? The building's history became obsession. Records hinted at a presence tied to the structure itself. A curse, a ritual, something older than she could grasp. Former tenants spoke of it casually, almost respectfully, like a neighborly nuisance that could become deadly if provoked. One account described hearing a voice from beneath the floor. "We see you. We wait." Another noted that shadows began to move even when the lights were on, crawling across walls like living things. She tried to reason. Perhaps the stories were exaggerated. Perhaps her mind fractured under stress. But the evidence refused to obey logic. One night, as she slept lightly, a shadow stretched across the ceiling, low and sinuous. She tried to rise, but her limbs felt heavy, immobile. And then it spoke, her own name, slow, deliberate, not from her ears but from somewhere within, reverberating through her chest. "Do you see me?" She awoke fully, heart pounding, the room still and empty. Yet she could feel it, the awareness, the weight of an intelligence patient and methodical. Each day, it tested her boundaries, nudged at her fear, learning what frightened her most. Mirrors became unreliable. Reflections lagged behind movements, sometimes smiling when she did not. She began to doubt her own senses. Neighbors whispered in passing, never meeting her gaze. "Be careful at night," one muttered. "They notice." She asked them who. They shook their heads, words failing. The unspoken filled the air. The apartment had a presence, a waiting intelligence. And every subtle event, every creaking floorboard, every whisper, every impossible shadow, was proof. Mara's days blurred into nights. Her life contracted to observation and fear, recording every sound, noting every movement. The whispers became commands, suggestions, and eventually threats. A message scratched onto fogged glass one morning. "We know." Her sanity began to fray. She saw the figure clearly now. Not always, but often enough to terrify. In mirrors at the edges of rooms, sometimes crouched, sometimes looming, it observed with patience beyond human comprehension. She could not touch it, could not photograph it, could not reason with it. It existed beyond the natural world, tethered to the building, tethered to her presence, tethered to the growing dread that had become her constant companion. And yet she could not leave. Doors slammed shut on their own, keys vanished, the elevator refused to operate. Every exit seemed sealed by invisible will, as if the apartment itself had become a trap. It whispered again, a sound that carried both invitation and threat. "You cannot leave, not yet." Mara pressed her back against the wall, realizing in a cold, sinking certainty that the horror wasn't a visitor. It had always been there, waiting, watching, patient, inevitably present. She had survived the first nights by luck or stubbornness. Now, survival required something else. Understanding, strategy, a confrontation she wasn't sure she could endure. And in the quiet spaces, the corners of her vision, she knew one truth with absolute clarity. It was learning. And she was its lesson. The apartment had changed. Mara could feel it immediately upon waking. The familiar corners of her living room were warped, elongated in ways that made her stomach churn. The ceiling seemed lower, the shadows thicker, clinging to walls with deliberate intent. Every object was subtly displaced, the clock tilted, books stacked wrong, her shoes lined up like sentinels along the wall. The air smelled faintly metallic, like blood or iron, though there was none. She pressed her palms to her eyes, hoping the darkness would vanish. It did not. The whispers began again, low and steady, circling her, overlapping, a chorus of voices from impossible angles. "You can't escape. You see, you wait. You feel. You are ours." Mara stumbled to her bedroom, yanking open drawers, searching for anything she could use to protect herself. A knife. A broom. Anything. But the apartment was barren, as if it had anticipated her movements and removed all tools of defense. Panic clenched her chest. She ran to the door. Locked. The key was gone. She tried the windows, sealed shut, unyielding. A shadow moved across the floor. Slow. Sinister. The air thickened, each inhalation a struggle. The figure was there, impossibly dark, faceless, limbs shifting unnaturally. Yet it didn't attack. It observed, patient, studying her panic with a meticulous hunger. "You're here," it whispered, voice like nails across glass, echoing within her skull rather than ears. "You can feel me, can't you?" Mara screamed, a raw, ragged sound, but the figure didn't flinch. It seemed to absorb the sound, feeding on her terror, her very awareness of it. She lunged forward with the knife, adrenaline blinding her, only to pass through empty air. Her hands trembled as she realized the entity wasn't bound by physical rules. It moved through walls, floors, ceilings, omnipresent. She ran blindly, slamming into the couch, the wall, the table, her mind screaming for logic. Nothing worked. Every exit collapsed, every refuge dissolved. Time warped. Seconds stretched into minutes, minutes into hours. Shadows danced on ceilings even when no lights remained. The whispers grew louder, overlapping voices, fractured phrases. "You cannot hide. You will obey. You will stay." Mara fell to the floor, shivering, and for the first time truly felt the hopelessness that had been building since her arrival. She remembered the neighbors' warnings, the stories in old news archives, the vanished tenants. All of them, just like her now, trapped in something beyond understanding. Her reflection in the cracked mirror seemed delayed, twisted. Her eyes looked tired, hollow, aware of more than she wanted. A knock came at the bedroom door. Slow, deliberate. She whispered, trembling, "Who's there?" Silence. Then a voice. Soft, almost intimate. "You've seen too much. You cannot leave." The words crushed her. She realized that confrontation was inevitable. The apartment had been waiting, preparing for her. She needed to understand it. To survive, she could not flee. She had to face it. "Show yourself," she yelled, though her voice wavered. "I'm not afraid." The room stilled. The temperature dropped sharply. Her breath rose in ragged clouds. The shadows bled together, forming shapes that were human yet not, limbs bending impossibly, heads tilting at unnatural angles. One figure, taller than the rest, stepped forward. Its face was featureless, a void absorbing light, but she felt it looking directly into her mind. You cannot leave, it repeated, softer this time, almost conversational, almost mocking. You cannot fight. Mara's panic melted into determination. She remembered her research, the stories, the vanishings. The entity fed on fear, on hesitation. Perhaps if she stopped running, if she confronted it without terror, she could gain leverage. She swallowed her fear, trembling violently, and spoke. I see you. I know you. I am not yours. The shadows rippled, recoiling slightly. The whispers fractured into static. The faceless figure tilted its head, as if curious. Mara's mind raced. Memories of previous tenants, of warnings, of impossible events, coalesced into a single thought. The entity was bound to observation, to her awareness. She had power in seeing it, naming it, acknowledging its existence rather than fleeing blindly. You are patient, she continued, voice steadier. But I am still here. You cannot erase me. A chill washed over her as the entity lunged, or appeared to. Walls seemed to bend, floors quake, objects levitated around her, suspended mid-air by unseen force. Books flew from shelves, shattering against walls. Windows rattled. Mara crouched low, focusing her mind, repeating aloud. I am here. I am aware. I am myself. The shadows convulsed, the whispers rising to an almost unbearable crescendo. Yet for the first time Mara felt something shift. She was not fleeing. She was resisting, asserting her presence against the consuming void. Then it spoke in a different voice, singular, commanding. Why do you persist? I exist, she said, firm, trembling, defiant. You do not own me. You cannot own me. The shadows writhed, stretching toward her like smoke. Then, abruptly, they paused. The room stilled, the whispers halted. Silence hung, thick, suffocating, yet not oppressive. Mara realized she had reached some equilibrium. She didn't understand it fully, didn't know why the entity hesitated, but for the first time, she felt less prey, more participant. The faceless figure tilted, then receded, blending into corners and walls. The air remained cold, the shadows elongated, but the relentless pressure of observation slackened. Mara fell to the floor, sobbing with exhaustion and terror, yet aware she had survived the immediate confrontation. Her phone vibrated. A message appeared. You saw. You remain. We will wait. Mara pressed the device to her chest, realizing that survival was not about victory. This was not a battle to be won. The entity was patient, eternal, tethered to the building. She had survived for now, but it would return, testing her, learning her, waiting for her to falter. The walls whispered again, softer now, almost contemplative. Mara rose shakily, aware of every sound, every shadow, every breath in the room. She would leave if she could, but deep inside, she knew that leaving was not possible. Not truly. She would carry the knowledge, the dread, the presence with her, as all survivors did, like a scar invisible to the world but vivid in the mind. The climax left her broken but alive, aware that the unknown was no longer a story, no longer background noise. It was reality, patient and inevitable, waiting to reclaim what it observed. She sank onto the couch, breathing heavily, mind spinning. Shadows crept along the walls, indifferent. The apartment seemed normal again, almost mundane, yet she knew better. The unknown was patient. It observed, and it would return. A single whisper brushed her ear. Soon. Mara pressed her back against the wall, eyes wide, staring into the shadows, and waited. Mara sat on the couch long after the shadows had receded. The apartment was quiet now, or at least quieter than it had been. But quiet did not mean safe. Every corner, every window, every door carried a weight she could not shake, as if the very structure of the building remembered her, whispered her name, and awaited her next movement. She rubbed her arms, trying to chase away the chill, but it lingered beneath her skin, wrapped around her spine like invisible chains. Her mind replayed the previous nights over and over. The figure, the whispers, the impossible distortions of the walls and ceilings. They had not been hallucinations. They were real, patient, observant, eternal. She could not explain them, and she had long ago stopped trying. Logic offered no refuge, no sanctuary. The only truth she could cling to was survival. And even that was fragile, uncertain. She rose slowly, walking through the apartment as though seeing it for the first time. The bookshelves were intact, the floorboards still beneath her feet, the windows reflecting the dull yellow of the street lamps. And yet, every object seemed to hum with silent memory, resonating with the unseen presence that had tested her. She avoided mirrors, afraid of what she might see, but the shadows in the corners of her vision reminded her that awareness itself had become a trap. To see was to invite. To look too closely was to remember. Days passed, or was it hours? Time had no measure here anymore. She could not tell. The whispers returned intermittently, softer now, coaxing her, warning her, reminding her that escape was never final. She tried to leave, briefly, stepping into the hallway and pressing her hand against the elevator doors. They would not open. The building itself refused. Panic clawed at her chest, but she forced herself to breathe. Survival required patience, endurance, and an acceptance she had never known before. Neighbors moved about as if nothing were wrong. Their conversations were muted, their glances quick and unseeing. Mara realized she had become a ghost among them, visible but untouchable, an observer of ordinary life while carrying the weight of the unseen world with her. They had survived too, in their own way, marked and hollow, each bearing silent testimony to the patient, inevitable presence that lingered beyond understanding. She wrote a journal, filling pages with fragmented accounts, drawings of distorted shapes, notes of whispers, descriptions of shadows. Perhaps someone would find it one day. Perhaps it would serve as warning, proof, or merely as an artifact of incomprehensible terror. She wrote because words were the only form of resistance she could muster. To name it, to describe it, was to assert that she existed, that she endured, that she had not vanished like those before her. Sleep came fitfully. Dreams were long, interwoven with waking hours. She walked through impossible corridors, through rooms she had never seen, chased by faceless figures whose forms shimmered at the edge of comprehension. Each time she awoke, the apartment seemed slightly altered. A picture tilted. A drawer slightly ajar. A shadow lingered where none had before. The presence never attacked, not physically, but its observation was an attack in itself. Slow, meticulous, intimate. She tried to reach out for help. Friends called and texted, but her responses were brief, hesitant, strange. They asked questions she could not answer. How could she explain a being that existed outside rules, outside space, outside understanding? They would not believe her, would think her fractured, paranoid, delusional. And yet she knew the truth. Knowledge alone carried a burden far heavier than any fear. Awareness of what waited, patient, eternal, outside the comprehension of the world. Weeks, perhaps months, passed. Mara moved through her days with careful steps, measuring her presence, avoiding triggers, keeping herself small, unremarkable. She avoided mirrors entirely, walked in lighted spaces, spoke softly to herself. The entity's whispers were less frequent now, but they never stopped. Sometimes, when she was certain she was alone, she would hear her name, drawn out slowly, almost tenderly. Mara. She came to understand that survival was not a finality. It was endurance. It was recognition. The apartment, the building, the presence. They did not care whether she thrived or not. They only observed. They only waited. Every moment of peace was a pause, every shadow a reminder, every whisper a confirmation that she existed in a system far older, far stranger than human comprehension. One night, she lit every lamp in the apartment. The shadows shifted, but less aggressively. The whispers came, soft, coaxing, distant. She walked slowly, touching walls, furniture, windows, cataloging every detail. She realized that her fear had become a language she understood, a code she could interpret. The presence communicated not through violence but through subtle distortion, through patient observation, through bending perception until her mind became a map of its will. She spoke aloud, softly, a mantra of defiance and endurance. I see you. I exist. You do not own me. The shadows recoiled slightly. A cold draft brushed her neck. A whisper, we see. You remain. We wait. She nodded, trembling. She had survived the confrontation, survived the impossible. And yet she knew the cost. She was forever changed. The apartment, the building, the unseen intelligence, whatever it was, had imprinted upon her mind, body, and soul. She would carry the awareness with her, a scar no one else could perceive, a story no one else could understand. Mara moved to the window, looking out onto the quiet street below. The city continued indifferent. People laughed. Cars hummed along asphalt. Lights blinked from apartment to apartment. She felt isolated in a way that no noise, no company, could dispel. The unknown had entered her life permanently, a shadow behind every thought, a whisper behind every decision. She had survived, but survival was merely the beginning of a new awareness, one she could never unlearn. Her phone vibrated. A message, blank except for 3 letters, soon. Mara pressed the device to her chest and exhaled, slow and steady. The silence of the apartment pressed in around her. She knew that tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days to come, would carry whispers, shadows, and patient observation. There was no escape. There was only awareness. She moved to the living room, sat in the center, and waited. The lamp flickered. A shadow shifted in the corner. The apartment breathed around her, alive in ways she could not comprehend. And Mara, fragile but unbroken, understood at last. The horror did not end. It was patient. It was inevitable. And she would endure, quietly, indefinitely, bearing witness to the unknown that no one else could see. The night stretched on. The whispers faded to a murmur, then to nothing. And yet the feeling remained. The presence, watching, patient, eternal. Mara closed her eyes. Sleep came, tentative, careful, interrupted by the memory of the faceless figure, the distortions, the whispers. She did not dream of escape. She did not dream of victory. She dreamed of waiting, endurance, awareness, a life defined by the silent, patient horror that had chosen her. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the apartment, it waited too. Soon, the last whisper lingered in her mind. Mara's chest tightened. She was alive. She was aware. And she was utterly, irrevocably alone with what had survived beyond reason, beyond understanding.